to you today about how to perform CPR. He was certified since he was young. He's been lifeguarding for a few years, and he even actually had to use it at one point, so he's not all talk, he had to use it, so he knows what he's talking about.
Thank you. Hi everyone, I'm Anthony. Today I'm going to be talking about how to perform CPR. How many of you know any of the basics of CPR?
Okay, we have Justin. Wow, a number of them.
That's excellent. I completely support everyone trying to learn at least the basics of CPR in case of an emergency. It's just a great piece of information to know. The first question that comes to mind when you want to learn CPR is, you put yourself in that situation. What would you do if you see someone right in front of you completely collapse and be completely unresponsive? And this is where CPR comes in play. And this is why I think everyone should know at least the basics of CPR. What is CPR? CPR stands for cardiopulmonary resurrection. And essentially what it means is it's the difference between someone's life or death. It starts up the person's heart and system again, and it can bring someone essentially back to life. So when is adult CPR necessary? Because adult CPR is the most common type of CPR. There's 3 types. There's adult, child, and infant. But since adult CPR is so broad from it, it's basically, you'll perform adult CPR on anyone above the age of 8 who you see is completely unresponsive and does not have a breath or a pulse. But if they do have a breath or a pulse, they might need a different type of first aid, like the Heimlich maneuver or something else. So you have to be careful. When should you perform adult CPR? Essentially, you should perform adult CPR if you see someone collapse on the floor in front of you and they have no pulse or no breathing. And that's the first thing. And that's when you can perform hands-only Cpr, which is a new type of CPR that the Red Cross just kind of came out with in the past year or two, which promotes, it's a much easier form of CPR, and it promotes more people to learn the basics of it. And I really support it. It's not the most efficient, but it is very easy to learn and remember, and it is good to know. So basically what I wanted to do is, before I went into all the steps in performing CPR, I wanted to show the sites ahead of time so it didn't clutter up my PowerPoint too much. So this is where I'm getting mine.
In other words, you summed up the steps from both sources.
Yes.
All right. Okay.
So how to perform CPR. The first thing you want to do is check the environment. If you just see someone lying on the floor, you want to look around and make sure that nothing's going to get either you in trouble, in danger, or the victim in any more danger. You want to make sure that there's no other people trying to get in a fight or something. I don't know. You want to make sure there's no fire anywhere else, something like that. Next, you want to check the responsiveness of the victim. You want to go up to them. You want to, if they're laying on the floor, you want to kind of shake them, not too violently, and say, "Hey, are you okay? Are you okay?" Make sure that they're not just sleeping. You want to make sure that this is actually a time that they need help. Then, if you get nothing from them, they're completely unresponsive, you want to check the ABCs of the person, of the victim. The ABCs stand for the airway, breathing, and circulation. The way you do this, I'm going to get to this on the next slide, but basically if the person's lying down here, you want to tilt their head all the way back to open up their airway in their throat. So tilt their head back. You want to put your cheek up against their mouth to feel for breathing. And you want to use something called look, listen, and feel. You want to look at their chest to see if it's rising and falling as if they're taking a breath. If you see that, then they're good. You want to feel for a breath on your cheek, and you want to listen for any sort of noise that they could be making from their breath or something like that. And the C's, it doesn't matter how you check for circulation, you want to do it as fast as possible, because when you're doing CPR, you want to have everything going as efficiently as possible. The fastest way would be to check the pulse up in the neck. If you put your finger up on your throat, kind of, you'll feel a pulse. But the most efficient way is to go on their left arm and put your finger right around here. But that sometimes takes a little bit of time, and that could get in the way if they have sleeves and stuff. So it depends on what the fastest way is at the time. So basically, I kind of went through this step already. You want to look, listen, and feel for breathing and check for pulse as quick as possible. And then if there's no breathing and the victim is still unresponsive, you want to perform CPR immediately, because they're essentially dead. Now, if you're not trained in CPR, I'm going to go through the two different ways, and then I'll tell you how you can get trained in CPR. If you're not trained in CPR, first thing you want to do is call 911, or if you see someone around them, like a family member or something like that, you want to have them call 911. Just some way, call 911, get an emergency ambulance over or something as soon as possible, because they are way more trained than all of us in here, I would say. Next, you want to begin hands-only CPR, which I have a video right here that'll be more helpful. And you're going to probably laugh because it is kind of corny how they make you remember it, but whatever it takes to keep it embedded in your mind is, I think, something good.
If you see a teen or adult suddenly collapse, it's important to act fast. Helping to save a life is easier than you might think. Just start hands-only CPR. The first step is to send someone to call 911 or call 911 yourself. Then get directly over the victim. Put the heel of one hand in the center of the chest. Then put your other hand on top of the first.
Hold on, real quick. Notice how the person performing CPR has their hands. You always want to have one hand palm down. You want to take your other hand, usually your stronger hand, on top of it and interlock your fingers. This is the best way to do it, and you want to have slightly bent end elbows, but for the most part you want to have them locked so you can have all of your chest pushing down, because it is very difficult to push on the center of your chest and get the blood flowing. You may hear some snaps and pops. It's perfectly normal to break ribs when you're performing CPR. The victim would much prefer have a broken rib than be dead. So you want to push very hard, and I'll let the video.
Push hard and fast in the center of the chest until help arrives. It's important to push at a rate of at least 100 beats per minute, which is about the same tempo as a solid stand walk. Let's hope you never have to use hands-only CPR, but if you see a teen or adult suddenly collapse, don't be afraid to try it. Remember, call 911, then push hard and fast in the center of the chest until help arrives. Your actions can help save a life. To learn more, call 877-8HA-4CPR or visit heart.org/hands-only-CPR.
So, I mean, that's just one way to keep it in your mind about how fast you should be pushing down on the person's chest. You want to keep it at around that tempo, because you do need it to be pumping at about the same speed as your heart would be if you were actually responsive and alive. Now, if you are trained in CPR, the Red Cross is the one who you want to go to get trained in CPR, and I'll explain to that in a second. But if you are trained in CPR, they teach you a little bit differently. They give it a little bit more of a little bit more complicated way, but it's much more efficient. Still, the same thing, you always want to call 911 or have someone else call 911. It's very, very important. Next, what you do is you want to do 30 compressions the same way. Obviously after you check your airway, breathing, and circulation. Now you want to do the same way with your hands interlocked over the person's chest, right in between the nipples, and you want to push down 30 compressions. It should take you about 18 seconds at the tempo that they were explaining. Next, after the 30 compressions, you want to tilt the victim's head back to open up their airway, and you want to do 2 very hard rescue breaths. Those 2 rescue breaths, you should see the person's chest inflate and come down. And that obviously gets air back into the system, and oxygen is very important for cardiovasculatory system. And after that, you want to quickly check for your ABCs, put your head, while the head is tilted back, you want to have your cheek up against the person's mouth, look, listen, and feel. If you don't see anything, right back to the 30 and 2. You want to do this for about, you want to do this until, as much as you can, until help arrives, or someone more, always, if you ever have someone more certified than you come, they're the one who takes over. You always have to abandon the post and let the next person take it over. There's a chain of command, because they have the more experience. Conclusion. I believe it's extremely important to know the basics of CPR. Even if it's only hands-on CPR, it could save someone's life. And if you ever get in that situation, which I hopefully wish the best for everyone in here, and hope that no one ever needs to know this, but if you ever do, you would rather know the information than not know in that type of situation. But one thing I want to just include is how to get certified. If anyone's interested, you want to contact the Red Cross or the YMCA, or there's a bunch of places that'll certify you. When I was young, I got certified through the YMCA, and their program is slightly different than the Red Cross, but not to be biased or anything, ever since then I've been through the Red Cross, and I think it's a wonderful program. I love the Red Cross, and if you guys ever want to do it, go on their website, there's classes. It's not very expensive, it might be $20 or so, but it's worth every penny to know what you need to know for the future. So, anyone have any questions?